here this summer, the most famous bike race in the world. But bicycle racing and bicycling as a fad were huge, and that's what people were thinking was changing the world for individual transportation. When engines first came around, the board track bicycle racing turned into board track World War I trainers.
Welcome to the Owl's Head Transportation Museum in Owl's Head, Maine, and today is July 10th, 2017. This airplane's 100 years old this year.
Who are you?
I'm Brad Carter. I'm one of the pilots here at the museum, and I do fly this JN4D. And I flew it yesterday, in fact, which is what started this conversation. So the topic for today is how to start and fly the Jenny, and some things you start with. Up here, you're going to oil all these rocker arms before you even think about starting the engine. And then we have a real radiator with real antifreeze in it up on the top. We'll check that, make sure we have that. In here, this is interesting. Instead of having an oil stick, you have a little gauge here that tells you where the oil is. It's a float inside the crankcase. And if you can see that with the fuel on, this is the carburetor on the Jenny, on the OX5 engine. It's on the bottom, and there are 4 fuel drains down there. And then back here, in this, and you definitely won't be able to see in here, we'll open it anyway. There's another fuel drain on the gascolator. So you have 5 fuel drains down here. So as part of your walk around, you'll drain that with the fuel on. Pull it through a few times just to make sure everybody's friendly. Oil the valves up there, check the antifreeze, and of course air in the tires. And then a lot of wires here. We have a bunch of wire bracing on this airplane. And you're just basically looking to see if anything's worn or frayed. And then you go around and hopefully you've got a crew to help you. The crew is really important. When I fly this, I generally have 5 people in the ground crew. Back in the day, the pilot would start it up himself and hop in. I have somebody to pull the prop out on the runway. It is a tail skid airplane, so there's no real steering on the ground. You can use the rudder. You can use the ailerons to help you turn, but it's really good to use somebody to grab onto a wing and hold that while you power yourself around. And yesterday we had quite a crosswind on taxiing, so we were using the ground crew quite a bit. So let's go around to the cockpit and we'll look inside there. Tail wheel dolly. So when we take it out of here, we're rolling it out, towing it with a tractor or with a large crew. And we lift the tail off the dolly. This one isn't very heavy, weighs a couple 100 pounds maybe.
The tail, you mean?
Yeah, the tail. We usually have like 4 guys tucked in here, or 2 guys lifting and a 3rd guy pulling. So it's handy to have a good sized crew. And then you fly this one from the rear. And the first thing a pilot will notice is this is a left-handed airplane, which is odd. It's the only one in the collection that is set up this way. The throttle's on the right. Most of the time when you fly a stick, you're going to fly with your left hand on the throttle and your right hand on the stick. This one's set up exactly backwards. And to make it more interesting, they put the single mag switch. The OX5 does not have redundant mags, it's only got one. They put it right where you would normally find the throttle. So, it's something you want to leave alone, but with the throttle backwards, and we all learn to fly on airplanes with yokes in this day and age, and you do fly those left-handed, but it feels completely different than flying this airplane. I don't know why, it just does. The big knob down there is to turn the fuel on. It takes about 10 turns to turn it completely on. And that's all you got. An altimeter, a VSI, and an airspeed indicator, and oil pressure. And that's pretty much all you're going to have. It's a rudder bar, real wooden rudder bar. This plane was built in 1917, and it was the technology of the day. In fact, it was a big leap in technology for the JN4 from the original Curtis designs. It was a tractor-powered airplane, and this has what we'd call deproducing controls. It's got a stick and a throttle, and whereas Curtis had originally a gas pedal and a seat that you swung side to side in for your ailerons. This one does all of that with a stick like we do on a modern airplane. Front cockpit's pretty bare. It doesn't have any instruments whatsoever. And of course, back in the day, again, they were used for delivering the mail or early passenger rides, barnstorming, that kind of stuff. You didn't need them up there. And then it was built as a pilot trainer for the military, and had quite a history of that, with about over 6,000 airplanes built, I believe, in all the iterations of Jenny. So once you're in and strapped in, one of your ground crew is going to pull the prop through. This airplane, I should have showed you, has a choke on it, which is rare for an airplane. You need somebody to hold the choke on this side, somebody else to pull the propeller to suck the fuel up, and it's generally good to have a pilot in the seat already. So it has that. Doesn't really have primer like we're used to, but once you get it sucked up, you can tell that you got a wet airplane, and it's probably going to fire. Yesterday it fired on the first pull. They did it exactly right. So that pretty much covers starting it.
Well, I saw Bob pull it through yesterday.
Yeah.
He's really strong, man. First time, it fired right up.
Right. He was in charge of that end of the airplane. All I had to do was flip a switch. So, and then taxiing out, as I said, I had the crew running with. It takes off, and it's funny, this airplane, I started flying it about 10 years ago, and it had an OX5 engine, probably only delivering about 65 horsepower. In those days, it was like flying a different airplane, actually. We would let it levitate off the ground. You got a big wing, it'll eventually lift off the ground and fly you around, pointed fairly flat. Bob has had the engine overhauled. They did a nice job. And who did that? Curtis Museum? Curtis?
McQuillan Engine Shop.
McQuillan Engine Shop did that. They did a nice job on the OX5. It actually lifts off the ground fairly shortly, and you can point it towards the sky and fly it. And it will maintain 75 knots or miles an hour all day, which is about all it's supposed to do.
So now, when you were flying around yesterday, I could see that it was pretty windy and gusty, and
yeah.
You were bouncing around all over the place.
Yeah, it was bouncing around all over the place.
So, and it looked like it was going so slow. I just wondered if that's because the airplane is pretty large.
It's probably just an appearance. I was indicating around 70, 75 the whole time I was flying around. There was a wind that might have been making it go slow, and like you say, it is large. So.
Now, taxiing out, when you were taxiing back in, you had an issue. I mean, I couldn't video you coming because you were landing on the other side of the tree. You had an issue of taxiing. What happened with the taxi?
Actually, just taxiing along with the rudder all the way to the left and the aileron all the way to the right, which normally brings this one down and helps you turn left. The airplane turned to the right. So I pulled power back and stopped, and I had that issue several times, not just once. At one point, the runway lights were closer than I wanted them to be, so I let the ground crew turn me around. At other times, I just stopped, and from a standing start, you can goose it, give it some power, and take the weight off the tail, and it'll come around by itself, and you can start moving again. This airplane, the tail skid is not fixed in a horizontal position. It will go side to side. So it's easy to oversteer a little bit. And that may have had something to do with it, but it was the wind just telling the airplane what to do.
Now, a couple of years ago when we talked about the triplane, you were talking about how you can taxi around on the ground by basically cross-controlling her.
Yes, and same with this one.
No,
actually, same with all.
But I got the impression that if you were to full stop in the DR1, you couldn't do that. You had to be moving a little bit. Am I correct about that, or just misunderstand?
Well, the technique is if you need to do a hard turn, you come to a full stop and set everything the way you want it, and then add power, and then power over the rudder and everything moving. No, it works from a full stop better than.
Okay, I just misunderstood. So, and this airplane's kind of the same idea then.
Same idea, and if you watch me taxi, you'll see every time I've got the left pedal in, I've got the right stick in.
But for all intents and purposes, it flies like a regular airplane these days, except for the throttle being on the wrong side.
Yep.
Now, do you fly it left-handed then?
Well, you pretty much have to when you're coming in. You want throttle available.
Right.
But for the most part, I was flying it right-handed, around and around with an arm resting right here. So, but when I came in, I had to fly it left-handed.
Now, this has the OX5 engine. That's a Curtis engine.
Yes.
The OX5 was just for the aircraft. They had built earlier engine for dirigibles. Yeah.
Right. Who is Jones Old Orchard anyway?
Harry Jones flew a lifeguard. Well, he sold the city of Old Orchard Beach on the idea of a lifeguard aircraft. So he would fly along the beach, and now they're doing it looking for great white sharks, but back then they were doing it looking to see if there was anybody in need of being saved. And he had a little ring he could toss out to anybody sinking, but that was about it. And they were operating off Old Orchard Beach. It was probably one of the bigger runways in the Northeast at the time. As bigger available flat spaces, we'll call it.
So now this airplane looks a heck of a lot like a Jenny. And tell us why and how it's different.
As I understand it, when they were looking for more Jennies, they went to the Standard Aircraft Company to see if they would build them under license. And Standard said, no, we have a better design. And when they said, let's see it, they said, yeah, come back soon and we'll show it to you. That's the way I understand it. Their better design was this airplane, and they had hoped to put OX5 engines like the Jenny on it, and that's why the fuel tank is right behind the engine, just like on the Jenny. And if you saw the earlier part of the clip, the carburetor on the OX5 is on the bottom. The engine they ended up with was a Hall Scott 4-cylinder, which was not a successful engine. Ultimately, they put these Hisso engines in there, Hispano-Suiza, and a very successful engine.
Now, why did we have so many Hispano-Suizas laying around?
I believe these were built under license in, maybe Bob knows the answer to that, but I thought it was built under license by somebody in New York.
What's that?
The Hispano engine?
It's a Wright Martin engine.
Wright Martin? Okay.
So they had the license to build it from the French, okay. Mm-hmm. And so now this airplane, anybody know where it was originally, or anything about the history of the airplane?
Not really. The early records on it we don't have. I think it was built up from several different parts of various airplanes.
But did you guys put the Hisso engine in it then?
The engine was already in it.
So now how does it fly compared to the other airplane?
I always used to think it flew better because it had plenty of power, would lift off the ground right away. But actually, the Jenny's more tender and maybe a little easier on you flying. This one, when you do a left turn, it wants to stay in the left turn. So it's to get it out of the turn, you're using all your right rudder and right aileron to try and lift the wing back up.
So the propellers on this airplane, the prop turns
Normal.
which is counterclockwise.
Yes.
Now, the British airplanes turn clockwise, right?
The Eagle 8 we have on the big Fokker turns clockwise, yes.
And the Sopwith,
Uh,
the pup.
I don't know that. I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't.
The thing it's always confusing to me, this gyroscopic precession. When you get, at low speeds, how the thing it wants to go the opposite direction faster. Let's see. It'll turn left faster than it'll turn right. Okay. And I remember when Carl was talking about it, when he was talking about the rotary, and he was talking about flying the pup and how he had to think about it. Because basically he just flew it around the pattern most of the time.
Right.
And he said that it turns left 270 degrees faster than it'll turn right 90 degrees.
The Camel is noted for doing that. And again, on that you have a big 400-pound motor entirely spinning.
Right.
This we have a 400-pound motor just sitting there. So we do have torque causing some of those same issues, but no precession to speak of.
But still, this airplane, when you roll it into a left-hand turn, you got to work hard to get it out of there.
Well, we have a big giant propeller, and I don't know. Going to the right, it behaves just the way I would expect it to. So, very nicely.
Now, do you guys give rides in this airplane?
No, neither of these airplanes we give rides.
Okay. That seems sensible.
They're both 100 years old, so that's...
I like the little swimmer there on the...
Yeah, that was part of that life-saving scheme. She had a ring, didn't she? The ring's on the back. The aerial life buoy. There it is.
I like that. That's really cool. I never noticed that before.
And it was apparently a multi-season thing. It wasn't just something he came up with one year and that was it.
He was looking for he used to fly his airplane.
Yeah. And he got a contract with him to do it. So.
I'm going to turn this thing off now. So, thank you very much.
Sure.
And